Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we're at the Blockchain Centre in Melbourne with Sam and Cale from BlockGrain. So how you going, guys?
Yeah, great, Nugget. Nice to meet you finally.
Pretty well, thank you.
So guys, BlockGrain, obviously agriculture based, you're looking to build on top of the NEM blockchain rather than a lot of projects which are building on top of Ethereum, which is fantastic as well. We've covered NEM on the channel. So what's your history? How did you get into all this and how did you find out about blockchain?
So I suppose I'll start off. So my history is in agriculture. I've spent a lot of time working in supply chains and working in procurement of grain, and I sort of realised there's a lot of shortcomings in the current systems and how things are done, and I sort of set about trying to change that in more of a, I suppose, a mechanical way. We were looking at developing sort of prototypes for different protein machines and all sorts of ways that we could help the farmer. And we realised that the gap really wasn't so much in the physical hardware side of it, but was in the technology behind logistics and grain storage and on-farm storage and supply chain management. So we diverted into that path and we went down the process of engaging with grain brokers and farmers and logistics companies and trying to work out, okay, well, what is it that you're missing and what do you really need? And so we did all of that and we put our prototype out there and we have farmers using our beta version, which they seem to really like, even though it's a pretty basic version. And then we thought, well, if we really want to secure that data, how are we going to do that in the best possible way so that theoretically a grower can grow his grain, store it on farm or in a bulk handler, but probably largely on farm, and we can create a full supply chain all the way through to a consumer who might scan a product anywhere along that supply chain and know exactly where that's come from, who the farmer was, who the logistics companies, and any other information that you need. So the only way we could work out how to securely store that information was through blockchain. And so that sort of led us to understanding, well, how do we find out where the best place in Australia to find out about this information is? How do we do that? Because we're not experts by any means. And so we came here to the Blockchain Centre, and the guys here and the girls, they're fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I suppose my story is very similar. I suppose one of the things with BlockGrain is, unlike a lot of projects that start up in the blockchain space, we didn't initially look at blockchain and then look at a project behind it. We actually had a project for supply chain and then saw the emerging application of blockchain technology for our project. And so we expanded and incorporated blockchain into an existing project. I suppose we vary from other businesses, and I suppose when we started to go out, we started looking at, what's the cutting edge of supply chain, and what do we want to be including in our software, and what do we want it to achieve. Blockchain emerged front and centre in that supply chain tracking and traceability, and also in smart contracting between different parties, and we realised this is something that we want to look at and a path that we want to go down for our technology.
They've definitely been the most successful projects that we've covered as well, those ones that you've got a working product, you've got a real world problem, you were working on this before, and now blockchain technology is a perfect fit, I guess. So.
We find a lot of projects out there, blockchain's like a dirty great hammer, and people are trying to find a nail to hit, and a lot of these projects just don't have that nail, if that's a metaphor, I suppose. We know that we have issues in our agricultural supply chains, and we've been working on that for a long time. So now that this technology is available, it just adds nicely with what we're doing. So
you said something to me in the pre-interview, which I was really stoked that you said. You guys aren't having an ICO yet, but you've already got a working version. You mentioned farmers are using.
Yeah.
So what's the thought process about where this was developed?
Well, so from our perspective, I think ICO, it's the Wild West. There's a lot of unscrupulous activity and a lot of fantastic stuff going on at the same time, and I think most people are aware of that. We fundamentally believe that we have a product that people are using it, they really want to engage with, and so for us, when that time comes that if we want to go down that ICO path, we want to be sure that people who invest in us are going to get something out of that. So we'd much prefer to have a product that farmers use, trucking companies use, buyers use, that people are already paying for. So it's a business that we then take to an ICO, as opposed to, here's a white paper, trust in us. That's not how we work. It probably wouldn't sit well with us. So we've done all the hard work. We've been doing it for a number of years now. We've got to this point, and we're about to launch our full mobile apps and the whole whiz bang scenario early this year. So we'd much rather build our business and then say, you know what, now it's time for us to scale. We'll go to an ICO then, so that if that happens, if that's one way of us potentially raising money, and then there's obviously the old-fashioned way, I suppose, as people call it now.
We also see that as being a really important element of our business strategy as too. I think one of the challenges is because in the blockchain space things are moving so rapidly, new technologies are emerging, things are changing constantly. I think, if we had a business that wholly relied on a particular technology or a particular way of doing things, and things in the industry changed or pivoted, companies that rely wholly on one single thing to get their product to market or get themselves over the line could find themselves in a pretty precarious situation.
Yeah.
I suppose because we have our business has, I suppose, real world value immediately and then is enhanced by blockchain technology, it allows us to pivot and have a little bit more control in that space, so we're less likely to sort of have the rug pulled out from under us if there's a major change within the industry as well.
I guess the next thing I'd love to talk about, a lot of my friends have done agricultural science. I'm from Tasmania, pretty agricultural heavy state.
Yeah.
Some aspects of that industry have not had an update for decades, and I think the average age of farmers in America is something like 40 or 50, even 60 years old. Is this an industry that needs a facelift?
Yeah, it's look, it's changed a lot. It's a funny thing. I mean, 10 years ago, if you said that to me, I'd say our product would have very little chance of getting market penetration. But today, if you look at today, I have friends on Twitter who have got farmers who've got 3,000 followers of other farmers. People don't necessarily rely on agronomists in the typical way of information anymore. They jump on Twitter and say, hey, I have a problem with this, this and this, and all of a sudden in comes the information. So that next generation, anywhere between 18 to 40, they are very much connected, they're very much automated. So I suppose to answer your question, it does need an update. Our system will now be able to get the penetration it needs to create that update. In Australia particularly, I suppose, once deregulation occurred of the grains industry, we found that a lot of farmers now want to support their own supply chains. So they, right or wrong, they want to support their own supply chains with their own trucks and their own bunkers and their own silo bags, which is a huge trend now. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're massive. They're like massive bags you just pump grain into and you can store it. So that's the trend, and it's a massive growing trend. But these farmers find they have no software to control their stocks, to get valuations, to understand their qualities, to understand their contracts behind that, to manage their position, to manage their logistics. So there's a big hole there, and so we're jumping in to fill that hole. And ultimately, as I said to Sam, if you said, walk in the supermarket 20 years ago, you buy lamb. Now you can buy Murray saltbush lamb. You can buy all sorts of different qualities of branded lamb or meat or whatever it might be. And grain will eventually, to a lesser degree, become very similar, I believe, in that people will want to know exactly where it's come from, what are they eating, what's been sprayed on it. The consumer is becoming so much smarter about what they're doing. And so if we can provide that information where a farmer can create his own supply chains, create his own reputation, then we believe we've fundamentally, I suppose, altered the way the grain industry is perceived at the minute.
I think people are very particular as well in other countries, like more so than Australia. Like in China, and that they want to know what they're feeding their kids, and there's a lot of money there and a lot of people. So
yeah, exactly.
Agree with that?
That's exactly right. And one of our partners is Chinese, and that's 100% correct. And look, although not always does it pay to create your own supply chain, depending on how the market fluctuates on a global level. But there will be times, a lot of the times, where the incentives will start to play out in that buyers of international grain will say, well, I want to buy direct from a farmer, and the time will come where they're willing to incentivise the grower to do that, because they're getting incentivised by the consumer to be able to create a premium product. And there are even certain places around, I know some mills that we're talking with at the minute that are setting up such a system where they're happy to pay an extra couple of dollars to the farmer to make sure that they get direct access and credibility around the data that they're getting off that. So that will happen, and it's coming from a consumer level. So once it feeds through, eventually the farmer should be able to make some money out of it as well.
So you guys are building those user-friendly interfaces all the way from the farmer to use on his desktop computer all the way to that phone app. And where do you see this going in a few years? Where would you love to see this going?
I suppose there's a few different options for us in how we actually expand our product. Obviously, you know, we're starting with the Australian grain industry. The first way we could expand, and we're certainly looking to do so, is take that onto a global level and expand into other grain markets, not only in terms of buyers, because we have a buyers component that we're working on with our system, but also in terms of the growers, the logistics companies, etc. The other thing as well is looking at different agricultural areas to move into, fruit, and a few others as well that we're looking at this point in time. And so I suppose we've got the horizontal expansion as well as the vertical expansion. So we're looking at both of those areas to move into.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty of the system for us is that we theoretically there's about 4 different businesses that we've merged into one platform. So a logistics company who's running bulk fertilisers or any bulk goods could buy that component and run all their trucks and their whole fleet just off their mobile phones, you know, unloading, loading, and then when it comes time to integrate with the farmer, they can do that simply so that everyone keeps in the loop and all the information is updated. So theoretically we could say, well, let's expand our logistics component, or let's start at the farm, or let's divert into a fruit-based system, which we have a beta version that we're just setting up at the minute in for the fruit. So yeah, there's plenty of options for us, which is good.
Yeah. That's fantastic, guys. This is an exciting project. One I'll keep an eye on as well. So, any final closing comments, or anything, guys?
No, look, that's about it. We're pretty comfortable with where we're heading. Like I said earlier, we haven't really pushed ourselves in terms of marketing, which is probably why we fit well with NEM. The NEM team's very similar. They have a goal about what they want to do, and if you follow their chats, you often see, come on guys, put some marketing out there, and that's not what they're about, and that's not what we're about at this point. We're more about, let's get a product that people want to use, and the rest will take care of itself. So absolutely, that's pretty much where we're up to.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. I wish you all the best, but I'm sure this is going to be a pretty successful platform and project. So cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.